Well, after about 2 years of brainstorming and roughly a year and a half of working on this thing on and off, I think it's safe to say the custom Cub Cadet 782 or John Deere 318 Wannabe build is pretty much complete, at least for right now. I know you guys have been eagerly awaiting the reveal of this machine, and I finally got it back together after more or less about a year of dormancy. In the past year or so, I hadn't really been running this machine much, just being away, at school and just with, other projects going on. And I guess we could call this thing the COVID Cub, since I spent all my time in quarantine trying to get it back together these past couple months. I got a little burned out on it, but I finally got the motivation to put it back together, and I managed to get it done just in time for school to start, because I move away to school again next week. But anyway, here's a final look at the 782. And just to reiterate, Phase 1 and Phase 2 are now complete. Phase 3 will come someday down the road. I don't know when, but someday when I have a little more time on my hands and I can get a good deal on a super parts tractor for the rear PTO and the dual brakes and all that. But anyway, as you can see, or as you can hear, I guess, the P218 Onan engine's been running great. I haven't really had any issues with it. When I first woke it up out of its nap about a month ago, I was having a couple issues with it not running quite right, but I'm guessing the sealant that I put on the intake manifold just hadn't cured yet. But ever since then, it's been running great. It doesn't seem to skip a beat. Now, of course, being a 35-year-old engine, it is going to, it's not going to be perfect. It is going to have a couple little issues here and there. It does seem to burn a little bit of oil on this side, if you can't tell by the soot. But it runs great, and it seems to have a lot of power. And she sounds good, that's for sure. Like I said, it doesn't seem to skip a beat, and it sounds pretty badass with the dual 982 mufflers on it. It sounds a little bit different than the giant single muffler that the John Deere 318 uses. But I am glad I went with dual 982 mufflers, because I like the way they look. They look like they fit the tractor, like their original equipment. And everything under the hood looks just like it came out of a 982, which is exactly what I was going for. My main goal with this build was to look like a machine that came out of the factory this way, and so far I've gotten a handful of comments, like on the Facebook group, saying how it looks just like it came out of the factory that way. So that's what I was going for. So just to reiterate, we have a P218 Onan engine out of a John Deere 318. It's running a PTO clutch off of a John Deere 420, which currently is not working. That's the only thing I still have to fix. I think the fuel coil may have a short in it because it doesn't like to engage. But that's, that'll come someday down the road. I'll tear back into it and get that figured out. And it's also running the mufflers and shrouds from a Cub Cadet 982. I had to do a little bit of searching to find these shroud pieces, because these are not the same shroud pieces that are used with the Kohler twin engines, like the ones that came in this tractor originally. So, everything bolted right up though. I had to do a little bit of modification on the top of this shroud right here above where the voltage regulator mounts. I had to do a little bit of cutting there to make the new style coil fit, because the B series engine that the tins came off of used a different style of coil. They use a horizontally mounted coil instead of a vertical one like you see here. Also had to change out the oil pan with the one from a 982, so it has the correct starter mount. It has the starter mounted to the oil pan instead of the block, which is a poor design on Onan's part. And it also has the dipstick tube that comes out on an angle to clear the exhaust manifold, since these use a different manifold than like a 318. So I had to change all that over. And I know you guys are all eager to see the power steering in action, so it's pretty smooth. I will say though, it's not as smooth as a 318's power steering system, but a few of the Cub Cadets I've driven with power steering on them seem to be the same way. They seem to have just a little bit of stiffness in them. But I think in the last video, I hadn't adjusted the toe in yet, so I took the time to get all that adjusted and dialed in. And I also had to adjust the stops for the heim joints here on the power steering cylinder to give me the right amount of length, the right amount of throw. But I got it dialed in pretty good, I think. It doesn't quite have the sharp turning radius of a 318, but it's not too bad. Like I said before, this machine is really just going to be used for dirt work and not a whole lot of mowing. So I'm not too worried about it. But like I said, my main goal with this build was to have a machine that looked like it came out of the factory and used pretty much all OEM Cub Cadet parts. The only major thing on this tractor that isn't OEM Cub Cadet is the Onan engine, which is out of a John Deere 318. But all the other stuff, like the exhaust system, the power steering components, 3-point hitch, and the CV drive shaft that's powering the transaxle, basically all the major driveline components and frame components are OEM Cub Cadet. So, you know, my main goal with this build was to have a machine that was basically a direct competitor to a John Deere 318, since Cub Cadet never really had one that was a direct competitor. They never had a machine that came with dual hydraulics, an Onan engine, power steering, and an optional rear PTO and 3-point hitch. Now obviously this one doesn't have a rear PTO, but I do plan to install one down the road, which is going to involve taking the setup from a Super Cub, cutting a couple slots in the frame to fit, and then raising the fenders up about 2 inches. I also have to swap out the hydro pump with one from an 1862, which I have sitting in the garage there, because they use a splined output shaft. These early style pumps do not. So I'm gonna have to change that out as well. But other than that, everything is mechanically the same as a 318 now. It's just the Cub Cadet equivalent. And I'm also proud to say that I managed to get this whole tractor put together without having to drill any extra holes. Like I said before, I have had to remount a couple holes just to make things fit, but I haven't had to drill any new holes to make any of the hardware fit on this machine. Everything else pretty much bolted right up, which is exactly what I was going for. So now some of you guys are probably wondering what I did to solve the issue with the supply line. As I mentioned in the last video, I was having some issues with the drive line, or the supply hose fitting, because I was using hard lines from an 1864, and the way they were routed, the supply line came off the pump and went up over top of the drive shaft fan, and it went up to the bottom of the steering valve, like right alongside the drive shaft, and it wasn't leaving a whole lot of clearance for the drive shaft. So to get around that, I actually decided to just use a regular length of hose. I had the local hydraulics shop make me a length of a 3-foot length of hose, and I put a couple of 90-degree fittings on it. Put one 90-degree fitting on the pump, and then put 2 90-degree fittings and an extension on the steering valve, on the bottom of the steering valve. Got everything tightened up, and I haven't had any leaks or anything from it, so I think I must have done it right. Now, some of you guys are probably wondering why I decided to use a regular hose instead of a hard line like it would have come with, you know, if it was an 1862 or 64. But when you think about it, the 318s actually use a regular length of hose for their supply hose too. They don't use a hard line except for the return line. So, and the hydraulics or the hydrostatic pumps in these tractors, you know, are only putting out maybe 500 or 600 psi of pressure. They're not putting out a couple thousand psi like some of the like what these hoses are designed to handle. So the hoses that I had made for this thing are more than capable of handling the pressure this system is putting out. So enough chit chat. I'll just take you up to the end of the street there to see how she runs and drives. This is probably the fastest garden tractor I've ever owned. This thing is really geared high for a hydro especially. notice it has a little bit of a bounce at top speed. I think I just have to adjust the steering a little bit more. It's nothing serious. I don't know why you would drive this thing fast anyway. The steering works good. Not quite as good as a 318, but I can't really complain. It could just be a matter of using a different fluid or filter too. Sure giddy ups and goes. Yeah, she runs like a dream, as you can see. I really just have to put some hours on this thing now, you know, putting it to work. Once I get the PTO clutch issue figured out, I will throw the 46 GT deck under it and try mowing with it, but honestly, I probably won't get around to that until next spring when mowing season starts back up. Right now, it's just, you know, it's ready to use as a dirt worker tractor. Haven't had any issues with the 3-point hitch. Everything seems to work good. I'll show you the lift real quick. I just recently acquired a second Brindley 3-point hitch plow, so come plow day season, this will be my plow day tractor, and then I'll just bring the 210 for a backup. But yeah, I'm excited to start getting this thing dirty. There's a plow day out in Ohio around Halloween, so you know, another couple months ahead, and I'm thinking of maybe bringing this one out there. I'm not sure yet, we'll have to see. But I gotta say, I'm very impressed with how this thing turned out. And it's crazy to think that I basically thought of this thing, brainstormed this idea from my my college apartment when I was bored one day. It certainly helps to know people and have connections. I got the tractor for a pretty good deal, and I got the owning engine for a pretty good deal as well. So it's amazing what just a little bit of labor can do. And now the machine looks brand new. Or close to it anyway. That is original paint, believe it or not. I had to do a little bit of paint touch up underneath where the footrests are mounted up here, just because there was a lot of rust from the old ones, where water gotten underneath the old ones. But other than that, I haven't had to paint anything on the tractor's body. I did have the engine tins powder coated because they were all a bunch of mismatched shades of black, but it looks good to me, and it'll hold up a very long time. So, you know, I replaced a bunch of other little odds and ends. I replaced the gasket or the seal that goes around the firewall. I got a new gas cap for it. I replaced the wiring harness. I had to get a couple new springs to hold the side panels together because the original spring the Cub Cadet used, it was one long spring. They're no longer available new, so I had to kind of improvise there. Heavy duty tie rod assembly from Extreme Motorworks. Powder coated footrest from Extreme Motorworks. New old stock Carlisle Superlug 4-ply tires and V61 Vredestein front tires. It's got a brand new seat from Cub Cadet and a new seat cover. Gotta have a seat cover, it's good insurance against a torn up seat. So like I said, someday down the road this machine will get the final parts needed to make it just like a 318. The dual brake pedals, and the 3-point rear PTO option. I Now, for a rear PTO on a Super Cub Cadet, you have to basically get the entire 3-point hitch with it. So my best bet is probably just going to be to buy a parts 982 or 1872 or something like that and swap everything over. It's not going to be a direct fit, but it has been done before, and certainly not in a machine like this. If you wanted all those features on a Cub Cadet, you had to jump up to a Super. For a John Deere, you didn't have to. You could get a 300 series that had all those options for a little bit cheaper price tag and just a smaller size overall, which is what I love about the 300 series. So anyway, there you guys have it. There's a final look at the 782 build, at least for right now. Phase 1 and Phase 2 are finally complete. Like I said, now I just have to get this thing dirty, so we'll have plenty of chances for that in the future, so stay tuned.